Two figures fall from a burning building, a teenager and a toddler. One frame stops time. City holds its breath. This is the story behind the photograph that shocked America and forced change. It was a hot summer afternoon in 1975. Boston's brick tenements baked in the sun. Narrow alleys carried the heavy smell of heat, tar and city life. Sirens were common in those months. Old wiring, crowded apartments, aging fire escapes that clung to buildings like rusted ladders to the sky. In neighborhoods where families stacked hope on top of rent, safety often came second to survival. When the call came in, fire crews rolled at once. Steel, diesel, discipline. A photojournalist grabbed his gear and followed, the way newsmen did then. Boots on pavement, film in pockets, listening for the hiss of water and the crack of glass. He wasn't chasing tragedy. He was chasing truth. The address didn't matter yet. The situation would tell its own story. By the time the first engines arrived, smoke had already muscled its way through the upper floors. A mother and her goddaughter had fled to the fire escape, the iron platform that so many trusted as a path to safety. Flames licked the glass behind them. Below, firefighters swung ladders into position, aiming to make contact before the inferno found more air. From his angle near the trucks, the photographer could see the choreography. Men climbing, lines paying out, the crowd holding its collective breath. He raised his camera not to exploit the scene, but to witness it honestly. A rescuer reached for the pair. He was close. So close. You could almost see the relief forming in their shoulders. The problem with old iron is simple. Stress and time. Rot hides in joints. Bolts grow thin. Paint becomes a mask. As weight shifted from the ladder to the platform, the frame gave way. There was no warning, just the sudden surrender of metal. A moment before safety became open air. The camera clicked in a burst. In one frame, life became a question suspended over brick and sidewalk, arms wide, legs reaching for anything that wasn't there. An accidental constellation. A child, a teenager, the twisted grill of the failing escape, a window choking on smoke. A scream you couldn't hear but felt anyway. The street erupted into motion. Firefighters sprinting, neighbors shouting prayers, paramedics running with blankets and boards. The young woman struck first. The child followed, landing partly upon the body of the only person who could still protect her. It would be called an unintentional sacrifice. It would also be called love. Back in the darkroom, the image surfaced in trays of developer, gray becoming black, outlines hardening into history. Editors debated, publish or spare the public the pain. In the end, they chose to show the truth. Not because pain is entertainment, but because grief, when seen, can push a city to change. The next morning the photograph ran, and phones rang. Some thanked the paper for honesty. Others asked how anyone could raise a camera in that moment. Photojournalism has always lived in that narrow corridor between bearing witness and being accused of watching. But without a record, memory fades. Without evidence, systems shrug. Inspectors and officials could no longer look away from the rust on the city's skeleton. Fire escapes, once trusted lifelines, had become decorative fossils, passed from landlord to landlord, stamped good enough by habit more than by rigors of engineering. The photograph pierced that complacency. What was once tolerated was now intolerable. In the months that followed, city agencies ordered inspections and enforced standards with new energy. Property owners found that paint couldn't hide structural sins. Welds were replaced. Platforms were rebuilt. In some places, fire escapes were retired altogether in favor of enclosed stairwells and alarms, preventive measures that work before panic begins. Headlines tend to flatten a story into victims and saviors. But the reality was tender and human. A 19-year-old with a life ahead. A 2-year-old whose world was a set of arms, a familiar voice, a promise that someone bigger would keep her safe. Firefighters who would carry the weight of this day for the rest of their lives. And a photographer who would be asked for years whether he wished he had put the camera down, and who would quietly say he lived with that question every day. The frame can't hold the heat that makes your eyes water. It can't hold the smell of smoke or the burn of adrenaline, or the eerie stillness that follows the loudest sound you've ever heard. It can't hold the prayers whispered by strangers, or the way a city walks softer for a while after a tragedy. But it can freeze a fraction of a second, and sometimes that's enough to move people who were never there. A year later, the image was honored with a national prize. Celebrated publicly, mourned privately. The photographer accepted it as a burden and a responsibility, not a triumph. The photograph was never about him. It was about making sure a problem had a face and a deadline. In fire academies, the lessons multiplied. Don't trust legacy iron under load, read platforms like you read smoke, and treat every rescue like the structure is already failing. In newsrooms, the debates matured. When to shoot, when to lower the lens, how to publish ethically, how to warn viewers without washing away the truth. The toddler survived. That fact sits like a candle in a cold room. She would grow with the knowledge that someone had broken her fall, someone whose name would be spoken with softness, whose last act was protective. Healing is not tidy. But survival is a story worth telling in full voice. For the young woman who died, there are no tidy lessons. Just a life cut off in a city that should have kept her safe. The memory of her becomes a kind of vow, that safety is not a luxury for the wealthy, that honest housing is a public good, that inspections on paper are meaningless if bolts still snap in the real world. Reforms came. Some stuck. Others weakened as years rolled by and budgets tightened. This too is part of the story. Vigilance is not a one-time decision. It's a habit. Tragedies fade from front pages, but metal still rusts, shortcuts still tempt, and alarms still need testing. The photograph remains a reminder on the wall. Don't wait for another picture like this. There is a cost to witnessing. Firefighters carry their own hard reels of memory. Journalists carry theirs. Neighbors carry the thump of that day in their bones. When we use the image now, we owe everyone in it our respect, by telling the story with care and by pointing viewers toward the changes that save lives. Not every injustice can be photographed, but sometimes a single picture makes the abstract plain. Building code becomes a child. Neglect becomes a mother. Urgency becomes a city promising to do better. Decades later, safety measures that trace their lineage to this day still protect families who have never heard the names involved. They don't need to. That's what progress looks like when it's working. Invisible until it isn't. Grief is not an enemy. It's a teacher. Stern, unblinking, unwilling to let us pretend that preventable things were inevitable. That day in 1975 refuses to be reduced to a curiosity. It is an instruction. Maintain, inspect, invest, protect. Cities do not keep promises with words. They keep them with budgets, crews, and checks that are actually performed. The image asked Boston for a promise. For a while, that promise was honored with drills, repairs, and a refusal to treat rust as decoration. If we have drifted, the picture asks us to return. People still ask, why didn't you put the camera down? The hard answer is that his work didn't cause the fall. It recorded it, so that those responsible for prevention would have no place to hide. We don't have to like that answer to understand its value. Documentation is not indifference. Sometimes it is the only way change gets a date and a file number. Say the names softly. Think of the hands that tried to reach them. Think of the neighbors who ran forward instead of away. Think of the first responders who still hear the clatter of iron in their sleep. Then think about the families who step onto safe stairs today because that frame forced a city to look up. If a single photograph can reroute a city's future, imagine what constant attention could do. Steady investment, clear accountability, and compassion for the people who live closest to risk. The point of telling this story is not to reopen wounds, but to keep doors, real exits, open when they're needed most. Thank you for watching and honoring the people at the center of this story. If this film moved you, share it. Support your local firefighters, demand real inspections where you live, and check on neighbors who might need help. I'm your name. This is Echoes of Time. Stay safe, take care of each other, and I'll see you in the next one.